Hello, and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest is Raj Goyle, founder of Phone Free New York. Our host, of course, is Sri Srinivasan. My name is Neil Parekh. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. Please like, comment, share, retweet, do all the things you do on social media because people are going to want to watch this show. We're so glad that Raj is here today. We're going to be talking about this effort he's leading to enact a ban on cell phone use in New York schools. And it comes with an unlikely opponent in this issue, New York State superintendents. You're going to want to hear his explanation of what's going on. We'll also get his critique of the New York Times. He has some strong opinions about that, and we welcome those strong opinions. Other specials that we're going to be showing today in this episode, the New York Times has a special section on pasta, the New York Times cooking special section, and you can get it from our website, digimentors.group/NYTReadalong. Look for the Raj Goyle Show. We also have a special section on the baseball preview, and the PDF is available on our website as well. So you're going to want to check that out. Some great journalism there. The show, of course, is produced by Digimentors, the consulting firm that Sri set up several years ago. And I'm proud to be the Vice President of Events and Communications for Digimentors. And we want to thank our sponsor, Muckrack, for all of their support of the show. Thank you to Muckrack. We have several people watching, and we're going to bring on our host, Sri Srinivasan, who's showing that one of those special sections right now. Sri, that's the cooking section, right?
Yes, it's all about pasta. And I think 24 pasta recipes. They look so good. I am super hungry this morning. I want to make one or all of them. And recipes, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, lots of great options here. And you can get this PDF on our website. So even if you don't subscribe to the New York Times, please go to digimentors.group and look for the Raj Goyle Show. And there you will find your ability to download that, as well as the baseball preview section as well. I want to very quickly just look at the New York Times headlines, and then we'll bring Raj on. Here is yesterday's paper, and ceding to Trump, Colombia agrees to alter policies, facing funding freeze, signaling new stage in president's feud with elite institutions. Trump rejects access by Musk to China plans. This was a story that was in the paper, and then they've denied that this was going to happen, but they're now going to go after the people who leaked that. What else is here? Sudan's military recaptures presidential palace, and Heathrow comes to a standstill. There was a fire, as you may know, outside the airport, and that kind of brought global travel. There was so much havoc all over the world. And this is the Sunday headlines. How a law firm decided to fold instead of fight. Target of retaliation. And we have a lawyer joining us, so Raj will be able to explain some of these headlines and stories for us. Trump adversary sees a business threat and bends to his will. Paul Weiss, one of the most famous law firms in America, capitulates. Congo rebels solidify hold on rich area. Rwanda-backed M23 taps mineral wealth. And we've been hearing so much about the mineral wealth of places like Ukraine and why that matters in this part of the 21st century. And this photograph is about these fighters and what's happening there. And online scammers launder money with ruthless efficiency, how life savings can vanish instantly. So you'll want to hear that story. There's so much to read in the paper. We want to say hello to our friends watching from around the world. We see Ron is here, Neil. Good morning from Dubai. He watches every show that he can, but he's a world traveler, former guest on this show. Our former producer, Paul, is watching from Tallahassee. Jonathan is watching from the East Village. Ken Fisher is watching from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Pradnya Haldipur, who's been on a guest on the show, is also watching. Good morning from the hellscape, miles from Washington, D.C. And we need Neil to be here so he can say hi to his mom. This is a great way to get your weekly hellos in, Neil.
Exactly.
And Auntie, great to see you. Thank you for joining us from Hastings on Hudson.
Mom, you're doing okay? I just wanted to make sure health is good, everything. Okay, great. I'll check in next week as well.
It's Naomi watching from beautiful Rhode Island, where it's a beautiful day and looking forward to the show. And Patricia says greetings and grace from New York. And Doug Levy's watching at 5:30 a.m. in California. We are grateful to everyone who's watching. Please tag a friend. Tell us how your Sunday is going. We will share your thoughts about what's happening. Ask lots of questions. We have a great show, and let's bring on our guest for today. Our guest is Raj Goyle, who's an entrepreneur, who is someone who is working on one of the most important issues of our day, how to think about our kids and technology. Before I bring on Raj, I want to just tell everyone that my newsletter is out this week, and it's the headline on that is about how to stop the tech bros and everything that's happening there. So if you get the newsletter, thank you for subscribing. It's in your inbox already. Otherwise, you go to srinet.substack.com and you can find the newsletter there. And we would love to hear your thoughts. And is it too late to stop the tech bros? And the cartoon you can see there is actually cartoon of Elon Musk. This is a Mike Lukovich cartoon, and he says the government's broken after breaking it. And these are some of the things we'll get into today in our conversation with Raj Goyle, who is joining us. We are so thrilled to have him with us here today. We have so much to talk about, and he's someone I have known for decades, and he's bringing his unique perspective on what's happening in the world. So everyone, please welcome Raj Goyle.
Shree, good morning, good morning, good morning. I finally made it. This is like making the big leagues. I've been called up to the show.
Hey, we're lucky to have you, and just so great to see you. You look great for a Sunday morning. Tell me about your routine on Sundays. How do you look so fresh?
Well, no, I appreciate that, and honestly, I do want to say you and I have been good friends for a long time, and I appreciate all that you do for the community. Appreciate how hard you and Neil work on this show. You obviously are a trailblazer in Desi land, but even beyond that. So I really do thank you for all that you've done, you and your family. So thanks for having me. Sunday morning for me is my rest day because I'm a fairly serious runner. So usually my Saturday is a pretty long. I don't know, anywhere from a 10 to 15 miler kind of thing. So I've got a personal big goal of trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon. So I've got to run fast and although I turned 50 in a couple of months, so I've got the typical middle-aged. Not only do I have to strategically comb my hair because of the middle-aged Indian man hair loss and receding hairline, but I also get the back injury and all of that. So I'm down for the count for a little bit right now. But I am Sunday is usually a day where I clean out my inbox for the week, hang out with the family. My girls are 13 and 15, which ties into the cell phone issue, and I don't exercise. So that's rare because otherwise that's a big part of my life.
Well, please thank the women at home for letting you be with us today.
I'm sorry. Just to be clear, they are totally sleeping. So this is not remotely a disruption. So,
I understand.
Yes.
In fact,
the women in my house are sleeping as well. I know Rupa is awake, but
yes,
this works.
Yeah. Our part of the reason I started the show so early on a Sunday is because the kids were sleeping when we started this, so we were able to do that.
I know one of the many bonds we have, Shree, is that you are a hunter dad, or I guess your kids are
Hunter
alums.
High School. Hunter College High School is one of the famous public schools in New York, where Elena Kagan, the current one of the justices went there, and Young MC went there, Audre Lorde, Martin Shkreli, all kinds of interesting people.
Well, you bury the punchline. It's Lin-Manuel Miranda's school.
Lin-Manuel Miranda School as well. That's right. And
where he is not only an alum, as is his wife, but they are current parents.
Yes,
and wonderful people.
And you're very active there. Yeah.
Lin-Manuel went on to Wesleyan University after leaving Hunter, which is where Pam and I graduated from. So we claim a little bit of Lin-Manuel love as well.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating high school because it brings together so many people who've gone on to do interesting things, but also the way they teach their kids. And you've been very active. And one of the things it ties into everything you're doing, but the importance of parents being deeply involved in their kids' education and being active. You have some interesting people, including Lin-Manuel, who are working with you at the school, right, as involved parents.
Yeah, so I'm one of the things that's been great, has been wonderful for me personally, and I'm very happy with this service. Is I am very involved in the PTA at Hunter, and I think a lot of people think, okay, a PTA, and I do have one daughter at a private school here, and and PTA is important, but they think, especially in Lower Manhattan, it's usually $8 croissants and some nice muffins. The PTA at an under-resourced public school like Hunter college campus schools is vital. It's like a small business. It's about 50 people. We spend about $1 million a year. We raise $1 million. The school doesn't function without the PTA, every bus and so on. And as you mentioned, one of the things that I really appreciated is the tapestry of New York City and the diversity of all 5 boroughs. And, it was actually just Hunter Day on Thursday where all the admitted families for the incoming class were there. I mean, you get a little teary. It just looks like New York. And, these aren't, there's a lot of people who are striving to make it. And, my daughter has one friend who commutes an hour and 45 each way from Staten Island to the Upper East Side because it's that level of grit to perform and succeed. So I have a lot of respect and admiration for what goes on in Hunter, and I'm happy to be an advocate as a parent.
And our daughter, when she was there, fought to make it even more diverse because this is a continuing process, right? To make sure it represents all of New York, and there's lots of interesting things to talk about there as well.
That's a whole other show.
Before we get to your current iteration as an entrepreneur working on this very important topic, and you have other projects, including the work you're doing, the 5 borough work you're doing. Talk a little bit about your career, what brought you to this moment, your amazing journey that didn't start in New York, and just one of the great stories about America.
Well, no, you're definitely overly kind there, but I've got a bit of an interesting story, I guess. I'm, as I said, I'm almost 50. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. Mom and dad were sort of, I'm going to say, typical Indian docs. It's not typical to be a doctor, but in the Indian American community, as you know, for that first wave of immigrants who got J-1 visas, if that program will even continue to exist under these folks. But, we end up in Wichita, Kansas. My parents didn't have $1, but they had medical degrees. And so they built a mom and pop clinic, and I went to a private school there for 18 years. And then, so I was very much raised in Wichita, and then I went to Duke, and then I went to Harvard Law School, and I never worked at a law firm. And I ended up working in South Africa on the Truth Commission for Archbishop Tutu as a first year, and that's where I met my now wife, who's an Indian American from Orange County, New York, from Middletown. She's the daughter of 2 public school teachers. And so I ended up being a civil rights lawyer. Then I was one of the first employees at the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive think tank in Washington. And then I did something fairly unusual in political life in America, which is I chucked my Beltway job, in which I had a pretty interesting one. I worked very closely with my mentor, John Podesta, and I went back to Wichita at age 30, and I grew up with the Koch family. I went to the Charles Koch Upper School, and I took out the most probably right-wing member of the Kansas State House, and certainly had the district, had the most Republican district held by a Democrat. It had never had a Democrat hold its seat. Certainly no Asian American had ever been elected in Kansas. This is now 20 years ago. So we really rewrote the book on how you win those seats. I knocked 8,000 doors personally, and That's true door knocking. And I was joking with someone the other day. You know if someone's knocking their doors if they're losing weight and they get a tan. And so I did all that. Served 4 years in the Kansas House. Governor Sebelius and I won the Kansas caucus for Obama in 2008. I then run for Congress in 2010, and I learned the vicissitudes of politics, which is I did everything right by the playbook. And 2010 was the worst year in the history of the Democratic Party. So I lost to Mike Pompeo, who your listeners probably know about. And then I did what every defeated red state Indian American politician should do, which is I moved to Tribeca. And so I've been here 15 years. We met in earnest when I helped run the family office of Donald Shelley Rubin, two great philanthropists and New Yorkers. And then I had the temerity to start a company. So I didn't monetize my political career. I didn't lobby. I didn't go try to become a wealth manager. Those are, important fields, but it wasn't for me. I started over at the bottom with a cocktail napkin and an idea. I started a legal tech company. And so I do want to talk about the Paul Weiss issue. I think most people very much misunderstand what's happening on that issue. But I became very involved in early stage legal technology. I successfully sold that company 3 years ago. And so now I'm an investor in early stage legal tech companies, but I still do a lot in the political space. And Phone Free is one manifestation of that. And I'll just quickly say, I'm a tech guy and I love tech, as do you. And I love creating companies. I love investing in them. I love growing jobs. I love the innovation. But I'm a dad first. And the most important thing, and the hidden truth, that if you put a few whiskeys into a lot of these people who actually run tech companies and everything, they know there's a problem with our technology culture. They know these platforms have way too much power, that the algorithms are addictive, that they never dreamed. When you and I are old enough to remember the world without the internet, and you've been one of the great pioneers on the internet, but we know that this device, even though it's incredibly powerful, and it has changed the world, we have no question, nothing comes without downsides. And that's where John Haidt has, I think, changed the world with the book, The Anxious Generation, in which the demonstrable science is overwhelming, Shri. The rates of teenage depression, of suicide ideation, of bullying, of, when we were kids, you got into a spat, you didn't get invited to some party, whatever it was, and it ended over the weekend. And Monday you kind of rebooted. Now nothing ever dies. It's always online. These people can have anonymous avatars and mock young girls. It's really terrible. And one of the things that we're very hopeful with Phone Free New York. We've been one of the lead organizations. Nothing really happens in Albany these days without an outside push. And so we've been very, very active to help the governor, stand with the governor. I must give her a great shout out for her courage on this. It was not in any way, Shri, politically, and I'm a political expert for whatever that's worth. I've been doing that a long time. And it would have been really easy for her to just sort of say, I got bigger priorities. I got to fund the MTA. We're obviously in this existential fight with the Trump administration, but she has put real political capital on the line to say, not only do I want some, theoretical ban, which I'll talk about in a second, but, I want a substantive, serious, meaningful bell-to-bell ban. And great shout out to the teachers union. A lot of people may have their views about sort of the role that institutional forces play in public education. But I have seen Melinda Person and her team on down in districts. They've had listening sessions all over the state, and they are really taking a courageous stand to say that teachers shouldn't be phone cops. We need to put the screens down so that laughter can emerge, so that people aren't at recess and in the hallway just constantly staring at phones, and that for 8 hours a day, God forbid, we have kids be kids, and that they actually learn and socialize. It's tough enough to be a kid, to also put this stuff on there. So thanks for letting me, that's we didn't have the filibuster in Kansas, but thanks for letting me drone on there.
No, we are so grateful for you setting that up for us. And Ruchira Gupta, who's a wonderful writer and activist who has worked on so many great issues, says this is critical. And she has a wonderful young adult book out called "I
Wonderful.
Can't Fly" that everybody should read. We're seeing comments come in from around the world. Here is Shashi watching from Potomac Maryland. I want to just say, everyone just joining us, that's Raj Goyle. I'm Sri Srinivasan. This is the Sunday New York Times Read Along. We'll be reading the paper together in a few minutes after we talk about this new project of Raj, one of his many projects.
Yeah, one of my many projects.
And he's working on so many things. Want to just say hello to a few people. Gunter is watching from Vienna, Austria. Ooh. And we are seeing folks who are watching, including Diane Stefani's watching from Chile, Margate, New Jersey, and Wayne Camadoy from the New York Times, who's one of the designers there, says there's a lot to read in today's paper. We have so much to cover. Chris Gorman says, watching from New York, I'm late tuning in because I was reading my newsletter. So thank you for doing that. And Sujana's referring to, she's combining many things, including when Raj said he was happy to be in the big leagues on this show.
The big leagues,
And Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar says, put me in, coach, which is one of my favorite lines of any musical, any song that's ever been written, but Center Field by John Fogerty.
Well, it's funny. My reference was even a little Bull Durham. That's getting to the show because
Sure.
I went to Duke, so that's even
yes, of course. And
and listen, these are all important issues, but in Duke land, we're really worried about Cooper Flagg's ankle and this. The world is going to stop if we can get this sixth title. So
and the tournament is going on right now. March Madness. People like you are fully vested in it. And,
oh my gosh!
Yeah. And here is Dan Foreman, my colleague and friend, is watching from Closter, New Jersey. We're just so happy to have folks. Look what Pradnya is doing. She is tagging folks around the country on LinkedIn. This is on Facebook, but she does it on LinkedIn, and everybody can do this. You can tag your friends, and they can watch us live or later. And Naomi is mentioning something that I was going to mention. This new series on Netflix called Adolescence. She explores this very topical subject. It's a brilliant movie. I presume you've seen it already. It's a series, and it's all done in one take, which is kind of stunning the way they put that together. Have you heard about this yet?
Yeah, I've heard all about it. I have not had the time, but it's getting a lot of buzz for good reason.
Yeah, and Pradnya is saying that as a mom of a 10 and 12-year-old, I say amen and hallelujah.
Well, if I could, Sri, just to jump in on that, I gave my older daughter, who's the one at Hunter, who's 15 now, a phone at age 11. Mm-hmm. Now, she is an unusual one because she actually doesn't use her phone. She hates social media. And we actually have to remind her, keep your phone because it's an emergency device, so that we can know where you are when you run around New York City. But one of the things is that for younger kids, for example, there's this movement called Wait Until 8, in terms of when you get your phone. But we remind kids parents of younger kids, you got to get engaged in this fight because you may think your kids are young. Hey, I've got a 5-year-old, but it's going to hit you really quickly. And so, there's unfortunately a cohort of kids who got the double whammy. They got unrestricted, unvarnished, totally promoted social media, and they had COVID lockdowns. And I think, as you well know, I'm sure you've covered on the show, my dear friend Julie Scelfo, who you've had on the show, who's a wonderful, wonderful advocate. She speaks very eloquently about this. My heart breaks for a lot of these kids. They had to join new schools. They had to have their college experience disrupted with COVID, and they had this very screen-dependent life. And, that world of social media is not reality. There are many, many aspects of it that, of course, change the world, and we'll get into that. But especially in those times, the researchers will say, Sri, you and I are adults, so our cerebral cortexes are fully formed. Now, they may not function that well. I'm not saying. I'm sure Rup and Monica can have their views on that. But nonetheless, they are fully formed. We are actually on, let's get a little morbid on Sunday, but we're on the backstage of, the way the human body works is that, we're now starting to decline, and we have to do everything we can to keep ourselves food. But when you're a child and an adolescent, you don't on the upswing. You're a sponge. Everything's being fully formed. Those synapses are firing. Those wires are being connected. And my gosh, what have we done in which we have said, hey, we're going to just subject you to unremitting digital addiction with addictive algorithmic feeds. And, I think, honestly, we're going to sit back one day, and the same way that we kind of look back and say, we allowed cigarette smoking on an airplane? I mean, like, what? And, we used to give away cigarettes to our soldiers, and they, in closed quarters, like, we did these things because of an industry and because we just didn't listen to science. The doctors were telling us about the dangers of cigarette smoke, literally decades before the political will manifested. And it is a side note on the political stuff. Bill Clinton does not get enough credit. In the 90s, I mean, the master tobacco settlement, changed the world. And Mike Bloomberg with the smoking ban, I ended up writing the smoking ban in Kansas, and that we passed 10 years after Mike Bloomberg did it here. That's the trickle-down effect of why things in New York matter so much. And that's another reason, Shri, we want the cell phone ban in New York State, because the eyes of the world and the eyes of the nation are on New York. We are New York, after all. And so that's why it's really important that we get it here, because I've lived out when I was in the hinterlands, and I lived that knockoff effect, because we were able to say, New York City, the city that doesn't sleep, the most active nightlife place in America, was able to enact this smoking ban. Surely we can do it here in Kansas.
Thank you. And Neil, you've been very good about controlling what kind of tech your daughter is exposed to, and she's 11 years old.
I would say, I don't know that, I think we can do better, certainly. We've kept her off of a cell phone in terms of having her own cell phone, but she does use Pam's cell phone, and she's texting with her friends, and she has a Chromebook and watching YouTube videos. Certainly doesn't have any social media accounts, but it's certainly challenging, particularly when other friends of hers have cell phones, and you're constantly dealing with that, but so-and-so has it, so-and-so has it.
Well, Neil, let me jump in on that, because that point you put your finger on is one of the most, I think, persuasive points. If you don't have time, and a lot of people, it's busy, it's hard to read books these days, but that's one of the reasons I'm a Joe Rogan fan, is that when he has an author on there, you're just going very deeply. That's why I'm a fan of this show. So listen to John Haidt on Rogan, where he goes 3 hours long on it. And one of a key takeaway of his and other researchers' studies is that if you ask children, would you want this device taken away from me? Universally, they say yes, with one big caveat: as long as everybody has it taken away, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because of FOMO. Now, adults have FOMO all day. Adults are wondering, I wasn't invited to this meeting or this party or whatever, because that's human nature. Imagine when you're a kid. So the reality is that we really should, it's very important, the universality here. And if I could tie it back to the ban of what's happening in Albany, Shri, if we want to get into the weeds there a little bit,
please.
Which is, we are feeling good. This is actually a well-timed show. It's March 23rd, Sunday, for those of you who follow state government. And God forbid, if you follow Albany, we can, you should get public subsidy for your therapist. But in the Albany world, in Planet Albany, we are right now in the most critical period. So a little bit of a geek out here. So the governor proposes what's called an executive budget. And then the Senate and the Assembly go back and they do these things called one-house budgets, and those were done last week. And then they jam them together. So the governor is actually kind of down this week doing budget. I was, with her on Thursday night, and this week is sort of down to hammer out the budget. Now, just a little bit of a step back. The state of New York spends $250 billion every year in the budget. This is a $250 billion document. And so there's, you can imagine the thousands of moving parts in that budget. And again, to praise Governor Hochul, one of the 4 top priorities she has going in with alleged leaders is the bell-to-bell ban. So it was in her executive budget. Thank you for showing the website there, Phone Free New York. And so what's happening now, Shri, is that last week, unfortunately, the state Senate basically tried to gut the bill. And so they actually passed in their one house something that is called a classroom ban, which is absolute nonsense. I mean, it is sophistry of the highest order, because essentially think about that, which is if the law says, hey, you can't use a phone during a classroom, Shri, does that suggest that right now that is allowed? I mean, I don't know who in rational society would suggest that it's okay when a kid is supposed to be learning and a teacher is supposed to be teaching, that a kid could be on a phone texting or whatever. So the fact, a classroom ban is it's Sunday morning, let's spice it up, is total and utter bullshit. And so, and they know that. And so what happened also is that was kind of like, phantom opposition. It sort of happened, and a couple state senators, sort of went on the record, sort of claiming, but not. But then in the last 5 days, we had some people come on the record, the state school superintendents and the school administrators. And as I've said, on social media and on my Twitter feed, I mean, this is really the worst type of pathetic, lazy bureaucracy in action. So they don't really want to deal with the concept of checking in a phone. Somehow, I guess it's too complicated or too much work for them, to get a locker or a drawer or a manila folder. I mean, again, this is not rocket science here. We can check in a device and we can do it safely. And the governor's proposal very thoughtfully says, hey, each school district, you come up with your own storage policy. So many of you listeners might have heard of a Yonder pouch. That's that thing that you see that's got a magnet. If you've got the budget and the governor has put some money in the budget, you can use a Yonder pouch. My daughter's
you see those at concerts. Yonder's very popular.
You see those at concert, exactly. And Shri, my daughter's middle school, they put it in a drawer. And there is, of course, a good person in that office, and they lock that drawer. And so yes, thank you for showing that tweet. I mean, and the thing that's most galling about these people who oppose it is they're really passing the buck. Because if you think what a classroom ban means, it means every teacher is a phone cop. Just think about it. Your kids are now, you're an empty nester, but think about back to when. So what happens? They sit down for social studies. What does the teacher have to do? All right, kids, put your phone away. No, Johnny in the back. No, hey, I'm watching the game. Oh, it's March Madness. No, put the phone. Then they put it in their pocket. No, put it in your backpack. I mean, all of this back and forth because we know how kids are. Hell, we know how adults are. And so we are hopeful, and the governor's doing a wonderful job around hopefully landing the plane on what is called a bell-to-bell ban. And anything short of a bell-to-bell ban is a failure for our kids.
And so that's what you're working on, a bell-to-bell ban. And there are several states where this is happening already. So there are actually, it looks like they're only the greens, but the grays also matter in this. So explain what we're looking at, and what is the current state of this? So we're talking, your work is in New York State, but
I'm New York
ahead of where New York is. So
I have a feeling we got a pretty blue audience listening to this. So you won't like the fact that Ron DeSantis in Florida was the leader. Florida did this, sort of the first major state to do it first. Arkansas has a wonderful bell-to-bell ban. So this has really not become. In fact, some red states have actually been ahead of the curve. And we have an updated map at Phone Free New York that we'll get to you later after the show. And so there's about 8 states that have passed this. But as you see, all of those gray states in gray are considering it at some level. And so my quick prediction is that I think by the end of this ledge session, a little bit of state ledge 101, which is state legislatures meet generally. There are a few states that have year-round legislatures, but from January through May. And so that's why the state legislative policy making is in that calendar flow. So, we're getting toward, we're well beyond the middle stage of that. And this is now crunch time in state capital after state capital to get the sausage made. So I think we'll probably have about 15 states. My prediction, I hope it's double that by the end of this session. And then so what will happen, Shri, is that we're going to evaluate where we are as terms of a national movement. We want to get the remainder of the states that haven't enacted it. And we may have to strengthen a bunch of laws because there's a bunch of states that have passed classroom bans. And I've previously talked about how empty that is. So this is a nationwide movement. And I'll say quickly, name me an issue, Shri, you're very up on public opinion, that has 70% plus approval of Republican and Democrat alike, rural, urban, suburban. This is a total movement of common sense.
We'd love to hear what people think about that. Neil's put in the ticker. You can see the questions about this. And should high schools adopt, and all schools, not just high schools,
Yeah, all
adopt
schools.
all day cell phone bans, bell to bell? Patricia says, "Wow, Raj, congrats on all these great accomplishments. Truly pioneering and inspiring." I want to bring in a comment from my brother who's watching from Dubai. Very timely topic. He talks about the series on Netflix that has shined the light on a long pending issue on the effects of social media and cyberbullying among teens. My son's school in Dubai has now announced that it will be free of smart watches, apart from smartphones, which are already banned. That's interesting. Do you see smart watches also as a problem because of the notifications?
Oh, yeah.
And things like that?
Yeah, if I could speak to that larger thing, then I appreciate the kind words, but and I've been on top of this issue around tech generally. If I could, my gateway drug into this issue was that I got very active on the Kids Online Safety Act. That is amazing, and that is a massive, massive Donnybrook in Washington, because that's really up against big tech. They furiously spent millions lobbying against it, and they won. But that would really have a very serious progress about the social media feeds. And so, there's a whole community, you could say, of people who are concerned about the power of big tech and how we could thoughtfully reform it, get the innovation, but stop the dark side of it. And so what's happened is there is a whole advocacy community. So I'd like to, obviously, I lifted up Julie Scelfo and Mama. There's a wonderful, wonderful organization called Fair Play, run by Josh Golan, and they're a leader on this. There's a group called Issue One. There's, of course, I mentioned Jonathan Haidt and the Anxious Generation. And then I think most inspiringly, but also tragically, Shri, one of the things that I think has moved people the most, especially legislators, are the survivor parents. So do you remember that moment when Zuckerberg had to turn around and apologize in that Senate hearing a year ago? Those were survivor parents who have lost a child to somehow because of the social media, they may have bought drugs easily that were laced with fentanyl. They might have descended into depression or sexual assault that people they met through social media, and it's incredibly tragic. And so I work with some of those survivor parents, and so there's an entire community. And I am going to land the plane on your brother's question, which is, there's a larger conversation, Shri, happening around ed tech generally. So your brother's question was about the smartwatch. This governor's, just to quickly answer that, the governor's proposal would cover that as well, because it's not just about a quote phone, it's about an internet-enabled device. So anything that's got the dings and so on. Somebody, I think, had mentioned the Chromebook. So there is a particular other issue around school-issued technology. In fact, as we were talking about at Hunter, they don't issue technology. The budget isn't there. But many, many schools give you the Chromebook, give you an iPad or some knockoff thereof. And so it's really important that software be locked down, because you don't want some school-issued laptop or device to be a loophole in which that kid is on gaming and doing all these things. So, it's a never-ending battle. The kids are always going to be smarter than the adults on workarounds. But yes, the intended of the legislation certainly covers that. And I just want to point out, because you like to know where the hockey puck is going, I think we're going to win on a lot of these cell phone bans because of the common sense parent movement. But the larger battle that will kick off a much bigger conversation is around ed tech generally, around what should there even be screens. And Jonathan Haidt's people and others have talked and Julie Scelfo and others around this. So watch that space for the next frontier in this battle.
Thank you. You mentioned Julie and Mama, Mothers Against Media Addiction, and the website is wearemama.org, M-A-M-A, and you can see, and we had her on the show where we've had her on the show twice over the last 5 years.
Well, she's double trouble for you because she's a former Times reporter.
Exactly.
And so, she's perfect for you.
Yeah, and so we talked about this very issue, and we're so glad that everybody is able to join us today and watch this. Please tag a friend. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, as well as digimentors.group, and tag your friends and they can watch and understand this. They can watch later. Anita is watching right now on Twitter, and she says, we have a phone away from the day policy at our district now brought forth by the district. It's interesting to see how much it is easier to manage as a teacher. Teach students and learn to do things with your hands, make, create, build. And if tech comes or goes, that does not change. That's so well put. With our twins, our issue, our kids are now 22. We got them a dumb phone so they could, as you said, an emergency, especially in New York City, having lived through blackouts, terror attacks,
Yes,
everything else.
sure.
And the kids noticed that, so they were happy to get this, what they would now somebody would call a brick phone, and they noticed that their friends got iPhones. And that was that moment which we discussed earlier about the pressure that they bring in, and they put together a PowerPoint presentation showing 90% of their classmates had iPhones. And, so that was a pressure that we felt that we should.
What did you do?
Yeah. So they got a phone at 11. They got the
Yep.
iPhone. We were so excited that they understood PowerPoint that they pulled us into it. But one of the things we did, and I recommend everybody do this, is if you have young kids now, have a device-free dinner policy. And or wherever you go, especially as a family, if you're going out to eat or your grandma's house, have a dinner-free device-free meal policy. And you're allowed to take photographs with the phone at the beginning and then put it away and then don't touch it again. And we do that. And then you'll see that the kids will force you to stop. They'll notice when you do this. And so a lot of this is modeling the behavior, as you know, Raj.
Oh.
And then take videos of them when they are chastising you as younger kids, when they're saying, Mom, we said no phones at dinner, Dad. And then when they're older, instead of you yelling at them, just play the video back to them. So they're chastising themselves about what they understood when they were younger. They understood the value of this. You're saying that now a lot of children are actually shying away from social media, shying away from the phones because they understand what the problems are. And I think this Netflix series is going to have an impact. Patricia says 100%.
Yeah.
I want to just bring in some other folks who are watching, including your friend and Neil's cousin.
Hey, our man, Devin.
Yeah, great to have him here. And Neil saying hi to his to his cousin. And Dr. Tachi is watching from Fort Lauderdale. She has a terrific show. Raj, you're out doing media appearances. I'm sure you're looking for opportunities to talk to different communities, different folks, because everybody needs to hear the story about.
Well, I have to say, I did a Fox and Friends hit on national TV in January, and Ainsley, who you might know, was absolutely, people think of Fox as obviously super political, which it is, but, Fox and Friends is also just a morning variety show. And, they cover this very, very well. The New York Post has editorialized on this. The New York Post, the most important, the most read paper, the one that drives political coverage in New York, not the New York Times, it's the New York Post, has covered this issue very, very well. And so, it's a good sign of just how bipartisan, nonpartisan this issue is. So yes, and I gotta say, Shri, that's a wonderful suggestion. I had never thought about that, of the boomerang video to call out the parents. That's a great. I mean, and I think I bought a little box to put our phones in, and I have to admit, like, it didn't take in our house yet. My wife's a partner at a law firm. She manages 300 lawyers. She's a service provider and is compensated as such. She's always on her device. And, I've had very all-consuming jobs in my career. So that addiction is real. I said this actually on national TV. I don't drink caffeine. And so 20 years ago, I gave up caffeine. And I said, that first few days, you get headaches because you're literally going through chemical withdrawal. So if you talk to the principals and districts that have had the courage to do these bans on their own, they talk about this withdrawal stage. The first week, everyone's a little jittery, they're looking for their fix. And then what happens? You get over it and you actually end up in this really great place. And the anecdote of John Haidt that I love to tell is that he's a college professor, and so you remember from college that the average class, very common class length was 75 minutes, like an hour and 15 minutes. And then he noticed over the last 5-6 years, everybody was using the bathroom. And so he started saying, like, is there some hydration scheme going on, or is there like a bladder crisis here at NYU? No, everyone could not sit still long enough. It was like a phantom limb. They had to go to the bathroom under false pretenses and check their phone. So this addiction is absolutely real. We all know it.
I'll go ahead. Sorry. I was just going to fess up that, you were talking about the phone-free dinners. I'm an offender of that. I'm often getting chastised by Pam and Emily. But Neil, Dad's on his phone.
Yes.
And I put it away as best I can, but it's hard.
The way to understand this and I've talked a lot about this, about how children use this. I want to just read Naomi's comment. As a mother of 2 adult children, I'm grateful social media was in the future. It simply didn't exist when they were teens. They're bullied enough without social media. This is the whole point, that being a teenager is complicated enough, frustrating enough, difficult enough without this. But the way to understand this, Raj, and you know this very well, that you have friends who are like this in Silicon Valley. The people there are very cognizant of this problem, and they don't allow their kids to use these tools the way people who are not in technology. Often the fear is, gee, our kids won't be as tech savvy. So I tell them, do not worry about that. They'll be okay. Yeah. As someone who was on doing television spots for Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 7 in the early days of the internet, people used to worry about AOL Messenger and just having access to that. What will it do? And I would always say, this too shall pass. There'll be something worse coming along. And that worst thing was the phone that just made life so much more difficult. And so when you see how tech parents are, go to this, Bill Gates' kids who are now full adults, when they were young, he would allow them something like 30 minutes of screen time a day, because he knew that this is what his own devices are doing, his own inventions and tools are doing to his own children. Tim Cook wouldn't allow his nephew to have an iPad when everyone else was getting one, because they know what this is doing.
Yeah.
And for people who haven't studied this the way you and I have, and you've studied much more than me, the fact is that these notifications are meant to be addictive, and they use the same research to make them as addictive as nicotine and anything else. So one of the things that we can suggest for parents, turn off notifications on your own devices, see what happens. Grayscale your devices. Each of them has a way of making it black and white. And once your screen is black and white, it's quite boring, and you don't want to touch your phone necessarily. And there are other things you can do as well. So it starts with parents. It's very easy to blame the kids for everything. And there's a moment in the Netflix show where the parents said, we did all we could. We thought we were doing all we could. We got them a computer. They were just upstairs alone in the bedroom. We don't know what they're doing. Get involved with your children. Find out what they're doing. Don't be scared of the tech. That's part of it, that parents are scared of the technology. Many parents are. Be involved. And that's what Raj is showing all of us, the value of parents being involved in their kids' lives in this very important way, Raj.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and obviously agree with all of that. And
we don't know what they're doing. Get involved with your children.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring in, Raj, some comments. Susanna Spear is watching on Instagram. You see the video image.
And that's what Raj is showing.
She joined and is asked if we were talking about adolescence. We also have other comments on Instagram. Did the audio come through when I did that? I'm sorry if it did.
Yeah, it did. That's okay.
It's odd. It's muted on my computer. And Diane Stefani is watching on Instagram as well. And our friend Walter Grayson makes an interesting point. He says to make sure that we acknowledge Ruha Benjamin and Sophia Noble on the problems of digital technology. So he wanted to give a few shout outs there as well.
Yeah, look, I would say one thing about that role of parent involvement. So one of the specious arguments made against the cell phone ban is to say, hey, look, these kids are going to be on their devices later, as soon as they leave school grounds. And so therefore, if they're going to be subjected to those harms there, then we really shouldn't worry about it at school. And of course, that's nonsense, because even under, maybe tie this to the law and so on, which is, everyone knows that phrase, in loco parentis. So, rooted actually even in our Constitution and in the Supreme Court jurisprudence is the concept that at school, the schools act as parents. Now, we have huge debates around where to draw that line. We have issues of school boards. That's going to become a political flashpoint. But it is so well within the rights and responsibility and culture of educators and adults and leaders to say, guess what? If I put it to a poll at the school, the kids wouldn't vote for this. But we aren't in the business of always catering to student demand. We are in the business of learning, and we are in the business of educating and of socializing these kids. And we have made a collective decision that in the interest of society and in the interest of that child who's still growing, that it is best that they put these phones down. One of the arguments of the superintendent's letter that really pissed me off and that I thought was so unbelievable was a quick little line in there that said the following: we also, recognize the potential that during non-instructional time, kids can learn basically the benefits of the phone and of technology, which is obviously the biggest, that is thickly stacked bullshit, because I want to know what school ever in which like a group of 11th grade boys are looking at a phone and God knows what they're on, that some teacher's going to stop and say, that's unhealthy scrolling. Why don't we stop and have a little bit of education on this? I mean, I don't know what galaxy these guys are in. And so that's why I really, I'm all for a public policy debate. I'm all for having, and if you lose on an issue, there's a little bit of sports, but if you play your best and you play by the rules, that's great. But that was really, I thought, one of the more pathetic things I've seen in my 30 years of politics.
Very upsetting. Folks, this is the New York Times Sunday. We read the Sunday New York Times read along. We read the Sunday paper and we discuss the news. And we're going to do that with our friend Raj Goyle in just a moment. We're hearing about this wonderfully important project, which is the phonefreeny.org. Everyone, please check that out. We're getting comments. Here is Apollo watching from Philadelphia. Diana says that my eldest kid was cyberbullied and we had to change school due to it. It changed everything in our life. Diana, so sorry about this.
Sorry about that, Diana.
We understand how difficult this can be for parents, and this is why, one of the reasons why we have to pay attention. Patricia says, I believe the documentary Social Dilemma should be shown as part of the school curriculum. Devin,
that's a great idea.
Neil's cousin, says I'm watching and walking around and watching on my phone. These devices are with us all the time. They can track how much time you're spending on your phone. What are the programs you're watching? Track that, and so you'll know. Our friend Ron Thomas says this is always a master class, and Raj is running one right now. Ron says he lives in Dubai. He's from New Jersey. I'm not a phone junkie, more of a laptop addict. However, at the end of the day, it's off and not open till the next morning. Well done. There's also this idea, keep the phone away from the bedroom. But some of us who have elderly parents in another time zone, we do keep our phones.
Well, Shri, since I've picked up two big tips. I love the video boomerang, as I'm calling it. The grayscale thing is interesting. One idea that I'm about to implement. In fact, here, let me have a little bit of a prop here. I'm going to lean over and show that I just bought a flip phone. And so I have to go to T-Mobile to activate it. Of course, these phone companies, don't get me started. I bought this thing and now I have to go in physically to activate it, which seems kind of nonsensical. But what I'm going to do at night, I have elderly parents and they live on our block, and we've sort of taken care of the grandparents for a decade. So I'm going to leave my iPhone in my office, and then I will forward calls. So, because remember that if it's a text message and I'm sleeping, I'm not going to see that anyway. The way to get me in the middle of the night if there's an emergency, and sadly, we've all lived those emergency calls, is the phone has to ring. So that's going to be my emergency sort of apparatus, as you will, which is that flip phone will ring. And then I do have a dear friend who's a developer, and he uses a flip phone, sort of in politics, famously Chuck Schumer. doesn't, he rolls around. Now he's got 5 aides around him at all times, but he uses only flip phones and calls people. And so I do think, and John Haidt's research has talked about the fact that it is not the phone that's the problem. When flip phones were out and common, there weren't any of these social problems. It is actually the smartphone that is the culprit.
And we certainly know that. Dr. Pallavi Guha says, agree with this, Raj. School is not the place for cell phone use. Also, there are places professionally that we have to attend where there are no cell phones allowed. So might as well get used to it. As a parent of a teenager and a social media researcher, we constantly have this conversation. Kids realize that phone-free spaces are good, but they also know about the addiction of scrolling. And Pallavi, please get in touch. We'd love to have you on the show down the road. We do this every Sunday, 8:30 to 10 a.m. Eastern time. We're live on our channels as well as the channels of Scroll.in, one of India's biggest social media, one of the biggest news outlets, and they have a huge social media following. So we're there as well. And we want this message to go out internationally, the value of what Raj is talking about. Ron says, I was never, I do not bring, for the most part, my phone to the bedroom, place on a charger in my office and leave it there. And,
Smart.
The interesting thing that you're pointing out that's different from other arguments made over the years is you're not talking about every part of life. You're not trying to police all of it, right? There's obviously issues of driving and texting and kids who are driving and texting and all of that. But you're saying let's focus on what we can get a handle on, and which is the school and this bell-to-bell ban. So,
and one thing is a bit of a segue into sort of political life generally. So what do we need in life more than anything, and particularly in politics, is focus. So one of the reasons I started Phone Free New York, just to speak tactically for a second, is that we've got all these wonderful organizations. I've now name-checked a bunch of them already. And so, but necessarily, they've got a very broad agenda. So having been in politics and understanding legislative machinations, I thought that there was a white space here for a laser focused organization to lift up this particular policy. Then what will happen, as again, having been around legislation for decades, is there will be implementation challenges, and there will be probably a need for a cleanup. All big pieces of legislation often have what are called cleanup bills later. So we're going to have to test and see and implement district by district around the state how it's going, what lessons are learned. And so that's kind of the exciting part of this. And the one thing, surprisingly, that hasn't come up in our hour talking, Shri, is that the main objection to a cell phone ban is emergency access. So when if you just grab a parent on the street, they'd say, yeah, I know the scrolling's bad, and I agree with that, Shri, but you know what really, if there was, God forbid, a school shooter situation, or you mentioned blackouts and terrorist attacks, I got to talk to my kid. Well, I think we have done, and the governor has done, an excellent job of lifting up law enforcement. So the cops and the first responders tell us over and over and over, the last thing they want is a kid looking at a screen, trying to videotape something, trying to play, hero in their own way. Very tragically, there was, I believe, a school shooting situation in the South where the shooter and that horrible, evil person heard a phone go off, turned in that direction. And so the phones are not our friends in a crisis. The protocol is to follow the emergency protocol of the adults, get to safety, and then contact the loved ones individually. But the school districts, and if this is in the legislation, have to provide a way for parents for that emergency network to happen. At my 2 kids' schools, one public, one private, they test the emergency system a few times a semester. They make sure they know how to communicate with the family and with the school community. So that's a really important point, that a crisis is not a reason to oppose the ban.
Thank you for clarifying that. I'm sure people are thinking about it. Jonathan says, sadly, so many things are now geared through mobile phones. The app that controls his hearing aids are on his phone. This enforces mobile use, to put it mildly. So
if I could, very importantly, that would qualify under the legislation right now. So a health exception, say there's a kid who's a diabetic, controls insulin levels via the phone, those sorts of things. So in your case, Jonathan, if that applied to a child who's hard of hearing in some way or had a medical disability, that would still be allowed.
That's good to know. Gaurav says that he's in Ontario. Cell phones banned in Ontario since last year. Kids in kindergarten to grade 6 can't use their phone during the day, including lunch and recess. That's also important. Those in grade 7 to 12 can't use them in class. Devices must be off and out of view. If not, kids will have to place them in a storage area. If they refuse, they'll be sent to the principal, who will consider a range of responses, including suspension. That's from the Toronto Star. Thank you, Gaurav, for sharing that.
Thank you, Gaurav, for that. Just to be clear, if you read the fine print of that excerpt, that policy for high school for 7 through 12 is still insufficient in the view of the advocates. If you read that carefully, it said that during class and devices must be out of view and put away. But that is really not the same thing as a bell-to-bell ban, because we know the way the kids will be at lunch or at recess. They'll find a way to get their phones. Is it better than nothing? Absolutely. But to be clear, putting that phone away when you check into the school day and then only getting it back when you leave is the best policy. And
Sujana here is pointing out that the school shooting issue scares parents. When there was an active shooter at UCLA, my son got to safety and was able to tell us he was okay.
And to be clear, that's in a university setting, so that would be very different. So nobody, I think, has ever, unless you said, the new frontier might be that a university might say, we want to put these phones away, but I don't think you could rightfully or reasonably tell an adult, to keep their phone away. So I'm sorry to hear about that situation at UCLA.
Though we did have, when I was, as you know, as a professor at Columbia for 20 years, there were professors who just said, no phones, no laptops. Yeah. This is my class. Good
of
luck
course.
to you. And they were able to have their own small bands. Neil, go ahead.
Sri, is the audio coming through on Instagram now, or is it good?
No, go ahead.
Sorry about the setting earlier. Susanna had some interesting comments to share again on Instagram. The teenage cashier at Walgreens has a vintage 80s calculator watch. When I asked him about it, he told me he doesn't want to use a phone. He listens to his Walkman. I don't know if people remember Walkman from the 80s for music. But sure. The question for you, Raj, is Phone Free New York in dialogue with the MTA? They're planning to phase out the Metro card, and it'll be necessary to use a phone as an app to be able to get onto public transportation.
Well, sure. It's funny you mentioned the MTA. Jano Lieber, the head of the MTA, was actually in this very living room last week. As Sri mentioned, I co-chair Five Borough Institute, which is a leading think tank here in New York. We're very active on congestion pricing. Love to talk about that, Sri, if you'd like, in our remaining time, about some other public policy issues. To be clear, the reason why the cell phone ban doesn't really affect the MTA, and though I very much appreciate the question, is that this was limited to school grounds. So yes, of course, I mean, I very much applaud. I'm a very early adopter of technology, and I love Omni. I don't think the MTA gets enough credit for rolling out to do away with the card and the token, and that you only pay per ride, and it can be any card from around the world, is pretty fascinating. But this cell phone ban, just to clarify, does not apply off-campus grounds. So if a kid, like my children, they need their phone to get, I think they actually have the physical card that's issued by the school because they have a student Metro card. Actually, interesting question. I'll have to look that up. What's going to happen when the MTA does away with the Metro card
this year?
What will happen to what will happen to the student cards? But yes, the phone is a requirement of modern life, for good or bad. But we are just talking about when you are on school grounds during the school day, the phone is put away.
You mentioned Five Borough. I just brought up the website.
Thank you.
Think tank.
Thank you. Could I do a little plug for Five Borough?
Tell us about Five Borough, and also tell us about your views on congestion pricing, just to set it up.
Sure.
America does not have congestion pricing, and very few things are tested out here first, but New York City is the first place in the U.S., following places like London, to have congestion pricing. It's become a political football. There was a push to it, to do it before the election, and then it was postponed after the election, and Donald Trump has gotten involved. He wants it canceled. So tell us your view on the congestion pricing idea and what's happening now.
First Five Borough was started by the late Dick Ravitch. Given your audience here, I'm sure many people know that name. A giant of New York civic life, ran the MTA, was lieutenant governor, was a financier, really credited with helping get the city back from the financial crisis in the 70s and thereafter. He and my good friend Tom Allen, who's the publisher of City and State, started Five Borough about 3 years ago because actually the think tank scene, particularly on the center left, even though it's not an ideological shop, had really really withered. And so, in fact, a lot of the think tanks on the center right are active: Reinvent Albany, the Empire Center, the Hudson Institute, the Manhattan Institute. And so this is really what we are, as a nonpartisan place to talk about childcare. We're very active in the childcare, the affordability crisis, obviously transit and congestion pricing. So it's a great shop run by Grace Rao, who you may know from journalism, was the New York One reporter for a long time. And we put out a lot of hard-hitting reports, and we call ourselves really an action tank, a do tank rather than a think tank. We're pretty wired politically, so we can get the right people into the room, like we did when we had Jana Lieber over here for a policy salon about congestion pricing. So you're exactly right. It was first proposed by Mayor Bloomberg, and it failed then. London has successfully implemented this, some major cities around the world. So again, we give good credit to this legislature. It was actually under Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, and the legislature that passed this, and Governor Hochul implemented it. She did last summer in June do a not so elegant pause of the program. It was supposed to be a $15 toll at the time. It did get out in the press that maybe that was political or not. Who knows? That was reported. But I think, to her great credit, as soon as the election was over, she said, "Hey, listen, this is important." She got it done. It's a $9 toll, although for taxis it's 75 cents. For rideshare, I believe it's $1.50. You might need to check my numbers exactly on that. And there is a congestion zone south of 60th Street. I live in the congestion zone. Right to my left is Broadway. My kids, their front yard is Broadway. Their backyard is Center Street or Lafayette. So very much affects my daily life. And so far, it was turned on in early January, and it's been a resounding success by any measure. I don't know how much we do fax anymore in this country, but if we do, all of the sky is falling fears, none of them have come to pass. Did the garages go out of business? Did businesses fail? Not at all. And you
did
and
Broadway lose?
Exactly. Broadway's completely up and thriving. And since the three of us are Indian American, that means we have extensive family in New Jersey. New Jersey, I believe, right now is 89.7% Indian, from I can tell. And so my favorite anecdote is my cousin in Jersey, who really wouldn't come to visit on Sunday because the Holland Tunnel would be so backed up. He now, congestion pricing is a godsend for him, because he now can reliably count on a commute. And so he can visit when he wants. And, as the mayor of Jersey City said, people with a little bit of discretionary income will pay, and the others, most people use public transit. So it's a good public policy. And just quickly on Trump, of course, Trump being Trump, he tried to unilaterally stop the program. I applaud this as a lawyer, as an activist, as a political strategist. The MTA had the lawsuit filed within minutes. And there's a great judge, Louis Lyman, in the Southern District, who's ruled on this before. And so I don't think the Trump administration, I think Jano and the governor and the advocacy community, shops like the Writers Alliance and others, I think we feel very strong on legal grounds that, of course, Donald Trump, which I'm happy to talk about anytime. I do a lot of media about current politics, is of course hell-bent on the fundamental theory of the Trump administration is, if he likes it, it's good. And if he doesn't like it, it's bad. And so that one principle explains the entire actions of this administration to date. So he says he doesn't like it, but just think about it logically, Sri, with some common sense. It's the federal government, and he's a private sector guy. If you could just sign a contract and then have all the obligations of that contract and then unilaterally pull out of that contract, it does violence. It does violence to the entire economic capitalist structure. So, that program that approved of the Department of Transportation that approved the congestion pricing program is locked, loaded, paid for. So I applaud the governor for saying, we're not turning the cameras off. And I think in this game of chicken, we're going to win.
All right. This is really important discussion, folks. We're talking to Raj Goyle. We only have 20 minutes with him because we've been so.
I apologize.
No, this has been such a great conversation, folks. We're now going to switch to just kind of looking through the New York Times and getting his thoughts on many different topics. He'll jump in as I kind of browse the paper. I want to show a couple
Can I
things.
kick off with a frontal question?
Yes, please go ahead.
So one of the things, I mean, Neil kind of surfaced this. I want to get your thoughts, Sri. You and I have had this dialogue before. So the Times is a venerable institution, but and it's so important. And I think you and I probably know a lot of reporters and editors there. And but walk me through your thinking, if I could turn the tables here on who the interlocutor is, which is to say, we saw what happened in this election. And one of the things, obviously, this is not a partisan show, but they would like to use the term legacy media. Others might say the term mainstream media. And I want to ask you a couple questions, which is a very important person, Michael Lind, who's a great, great public intellectual, told me one thing, which is other countries don't have the concept of a paper of record. And you've traveled the world and you're quite a global citizen. So what they do is they know that there's a slant to every paper. So if you read a Murdoch paper in London, you sort of know where it's coming from. And then if you're a really thoughtful person, you sort of read a few of these papers and you kind of put it all together. But here we have this notion that there's a paper of record, even though on the editorial side, we know exactly where the Times stands politically and culturally. And so one of the things that I think has in this entire debate around the media and now Musk owning social media and so on has been the fact that it's clear that the Times and the mainstream media don't have the cultural purchase that they had, even 5 years ago, what to make of 20 or 30 years ago. So my question to you is why the continued emphasis on this kind of old school way of reading a Sunday Deadwood version of who these 7 stories on the front of a page in a world of Substack and podcast and Twitter and the world happening that obviously is driving the conversation much more than these 7 stories.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I wish we had a lot of time to talk about this. And it's really important because Neil and I do get people saying, you laid out a lot of that, but the other part that you didn't say is they dislike the New York Times from, we get much more criticism about the New York Times from progressives than we do from conservatives, because they just feel that Neil and I shouldn't be doing this. Your phrase it in a different way.
Yeah, and I'm not talking normatively. I'm almost curious as to how you see it. Yeah.
So very quick history of the show is that I want to go all the way back to when I was a kid. The New York Times would land on our doorstep.
Sure.
And I'd never seen anything like it. We came to this country when I was 9 years old, and this thick newspaper would land, especially the Sunday New York Times. And so I've been a journalist. I got my first byline when I was 16 in a newspaper called the Fiji Sun, because I went to high school in Fiji. And from that moment, I saw, and from reading the paper as a kid, that there's something magical about print. And one of the things, my life's work has been digital. And I've been known for the digital work and everything else. I still believe there's value in this format. We subscribe to multiple magazines. We used to get 3 newspapers, then 2 newspapers, and now just 1, and now only on the weekend because I just don't have the time.
And sorry if I can interrupt. I get actually 3 print papers a day, so I'm not.
So you understand. So part of what we're doing is, so I started reading the paper every Sunday, like I say, like a crazy person out loud, to test and understand this Facebook Live technology. And along the way, we built a community, and Neil and others. So we use this as an excuse to interview great people like you. But we do get this criticism about the Times' coverage, about what it's doing, what it's reporting, what it's saying, and whether it's still relevant. And we know that this idea of paper of record is problematic. I, in fact, never used that phrase in the now 9 years we've been doing this. Is our 10th year. We've never used that phrase, but it's still a way to talk about the news, and the Times still sets the agenda in some ways, as you know, especially as the Washington Post and others have been under so much fire. They still have the resources. That story about Elon Musk getting access to the secret China war plans. Why, of all the people in the world you don't want to show your China war plans to, is somebody whose life and work is dedicated
and there's hundreds of billions.
dependent
Yes, of course.
on China.
Shocking.
This
What a concept.
yeah, but so they're able to do things now, even though it's, we're talking about this print edition, there is still, it's so much of it is actually digital, as you said, and many of the stories we're looking at here have been circulating on the internet for 3 days already.
Yeah, of course,
as
exactly.
you know, and it's kind of interesting. So let's just quickly look at
Yeah.
things, because I don't want to lose the chance to
Yep.
get your thoughts, for example, on this story about Paul
Sure.
Weiss. And you said that
Yeah.
this law firm story, a law firm that has been an antagonist of Donald Trump, the head of it went and basically said they're going to spend $40 million to do free work on behalf of topics that the Trump administration cares about. So talk about that.
Yeah, so one quick clarification. Paul Weiss was never an antagonist of Donald Trump in any way. That's not the rule of big law firms. And so one of the things—
this is wrong. So this phrase here, Trump adversary.
The Trump adversary probably refers to, in the subhead, to Brad Karp. So Brad Karp is the most probably successful law firm chair of the last 25 years, and he was a massive. He's not only become fabulously wealthy, as Paul Weiss has tripled its profit per partner, and I'm using a little bit of legal business jargon here, but basically Paul Weiss has had, when I went to law school 25 years ago, it was an elite firm, but it has now become incredibly more just powerful in terms of money, and that's really what big law is about. And so one of the things, if you let me just give 30 seconds to step back here, because this is my other real mission, and one of my missions in life, which is, so I've got a unique perspective as a former state legislator, as a legal tech entrepreneur, and as a lawyer. And so the legal system is one of those issues that is never talked about, but is really become a perverse system. And the American people know it. And I actually use these words of six words, which are poor sucks, middle scared, rich obnoxious, which is the poor get no legal services whatsoever. And that's an outrage. And then the middle class are afraid of a lawyer. That's a bankruptcy, an accident, something like that. And then the rich get, $2,000 an hour, and my company, we were in that space because we were trying to optimize the legal fees for big, Fortune 500 corporations and private equity firms. It was a successful company. And so I think the misunderstanding here is that people are trying to pigeonhole or frame a top 10 law firm as some sort of social good. And that's not at all what a big law firm is. A big law firm is paid by elite corporations to do extraordinarily expensive work, 75% of which, by the way, could be automated by AI. And the legal profession actually actively resists all technology. And I'm on the leading front of that, which is, again, think about it. We don't travel by horse and buggy. We don't read by candlelight. We let progress reign in good ways, and the legal system being automated and could help our people live better lives. That's the role of a legal system. So I understand, of course, the politics of this intimately. I understand the bending the knee concept, but people really misunderstand what's happening here, which is Paul Weiss has one mission, which is profit. Paul Weiss and every law firm is set out to charge maximum fees for its legal work. Is McDonald's in the business of selling less hamburgers? Like, that's what a law firm does. And so their personal politics aside, Brad Karp was very, very close with Kamala Harris. And so he would have probably gotten an appointment or someone that's well known. So that's the reason that he was really targeted. And Brad is a very successful and arguably the most well-known law firm chair in the country.
So you're saying
that's the real backstory.
To keep his company, to keep them out of his company. Is that what it is?
Of course, that's the reason he's the chair of Paul Weiss. And so,
but why is it okay? Why is it not okay to kind of frame it as him capitulating before it even got started?
Well, but the question is, what's the capitulation? Of course they did. Of course they said. Of course they said, Trump, we're going to do what you do. But that is what law firms do. I mean, that is the very essence. They are in business to do that sort of business. And it speaks to actually the larger point about how the progressive and liberal mindset has missed what has gone on over the last 20, 30 years. So the sort of the mindset here is this sort of, I don't know, this almost it's almost being framed as if Paul Weiss is a resistance institution when it's a $4 billion, it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation extracting fees for doing the work of corporate America. Now, that's not a criticism of it. It just is what it does. So of course it's going to, what would you have Brad Karp do? I guess he could resign, and I guess he could say, hey, listen, this is outrageous. But then, by the way, the firm goes away. He would have defection because that firm is a coalition and a collection of partners who have books of business. And Paul Weiss is a platform to have them make their money.
I hear you. Because I think you framed it very well, and I think people should understand that. Let's just very quickly look at the paper.
Yeah.
We have about 10 minutes left. Online scammers launder money with ruthless efficiency. A boxing champ transformed into a heavyweight pitchman. You remember George Foreman grill.
Rumble in the jungle.
Yeah, and a diner for the future caught in Musk's present. Tesla's culinary venture shadowed by politics. This is the Tesla drive-in that I didn't know about. One thing that I will say is that I think it helps progressives in no way to have the physical attacks and devastation that's been, and destruction of Tesla cars, and it just doesn't help in any way, and will only feed into the anger that's there. Kennedy files are gold mine in other fields. So they're saying that a lot of the things that were expected to be in there were not, or were, so unusual things are in there. This is the cooking section. Do you cook yourself? Do you cook yourself?
No, it's funny. Monica and I have been together 26 years. I think we've cooked 3 meals in that time. And if I were you, I wouldn't have eaten any of those 3 meals. So, so I got to say, at the top of the show, when you said you go to the pasta thing and you search for Raj Goyle show, I had to say, because that really is a huge honor for me, because that will be the only time in life that the New York Times cooking and my name ever comes connected. I'm honored to be quoted in other New York Times stories. It will never be about cooking.
Never be in the cooking section. But if everybody goes to digimentors.group, they can get a free PDF of these 24 pasta recipes.
Wow.
So just go to digimentors.group, look for Raj's face, and in there you click through, you'll get that and the baseball preview. Any predictions? Cool. Baseball predictions for this year?
It's funny. I'm a massive Dallas Cowboys fan, big Duke basketball fan. I'm in the baseball world. I'm a Mets guy, but I don't follow baseball.
Neil is a huge Yankees guy, so he will probably be wearing his hat later.
But by the way, just on the Indian American front, I'll only say this is public information, but the San Diego Padres are in an ownership dispute, and on one side of it, if it's resolved, is an Indian American woman. So that's actually worth checking out. And so depending how that goes, there may be Indian American representation with in MLB via the Padres.
Wow. And we do know that Shad Khan, who's Pakistani American, owns the Jaguars in the NFL.
And then Ranadive of the Kings,
Yes, correct. The Sacramento Kings in the basketball. Arts and Leisure cover is She Fills a House. Sonia Friedman's eye for a hit has brought over 300 shows like Harry Potter and Stereophonic to the stage. Have you been to a Broadway show lately?
I am an active theater goer, and in fact, we do, since we're downtown, we do a lot with the public, and which is obviously a great institution. So I don't remember the last show I've been to, but I actually have an idea for a play I'd like to write.
Wow,
let's see, that's in my.
When other people say that, I have no hope, but with you, I wouldn't be surprised if anyone can pull it off. Look at this. This is from my childhood.
I read that. Of
Tina
course.
Louise reads to children. She says partly because no one read to her. An Escape from Gilligan's Island.
I saw that.
This is Ginger.
Amazing. Ginger, are you kidding? The movie star.
And
by the way, do you know there's a little quirk in the first season of Gilligan's Island, that the famous theme song? They said they said the movie star, and then they said and the rest. And they omitted the Professor and Marianne because I don't think they had locked down those 2 contracts.
Correct.
It was actually a contract dispute. They had the other stars argued to having them included, the Professor and Marianne included in the theme song after season 2.
Very good.
But yeah, that was a big issue.
And
Gilligan's Island fan.
And here is Sunday routine. Varun Kataria. He loves the nightlife. It's his business. Staying out late means a slow roll into morning activities. The Sunday routine of Varun Kataria is a nightclub owner. I'm too old to go into nightclubs, but this is his story here.
So can I give you a 10-second quick
Yes.
reaction to this? Or is that the game? Okay. I think the nightlife piece of New York City, it may be the one good thing Eric Adams has done. And so I think I'm one of those people who really laments the fact that even though I do go to bed early, that New York City seems to not be the city that never sleeps anymore. I tried to get a 24-hour pharmacy the other day because I really needed some antibiotics. And there was only 2 in the entire island of Manhattan. So I do think I'm glad to see the nightlife that Dacey's doing that. And I very much applaud keeping New York's character. I have a haunted house across from my street that flares up in October, and a lot of the neighbors don't like it. But I think that's what makes New York, New York. You know,
Sure.
It's super cool.
Sure. By the way, we live next to the only 24-hour hardware store
Cool.
in probably the island of Manhattan. And the fact that there are 2 pharmacies and 1 hardware store says the ratio is probably wrong. But here we go. This is a story about distractions prompts calls for phone-free school days. Disconnecting students from devices is seen as a step towards.
Is this the big city column?
Yes, by Ginny Belafonte.
By Ginny, yeah.
And,
So that's a great example. You said that. I read that 2 days ago.
yeah, exactly.
So I didn't even realize it was in the Deadwood today.
Yeah,
But actually, she quotes Mike Mulgrew. I'm actually got connected to her yesterday
Very cool.
to talk about this. Yeah.
And then you see, this is an example of how a
Yes.
school can put away the phones. Yeah.
I think one thing we might do at Phone Free New York is, fingers crossed, knock on wood here, if the bill gets through, is we need to help the school districts come up with those kind of devices and so on, and give them best practices on how to store them.
Sure. So this is Ben Rhodes, the radical change Democrats need to win against Trump. Being the political animal you are,
Yes,
what is your prescription for
Look,
Democrats?
I mean, that's obviously a whole show, but I'll give you two quick hot takes. Number one, it is clear that in the era we're in, that the divide is no longer even ideological. People want to do this tired thing of Bernie versus the corporate Dems and so on. The divide right now in the party is fight or not fight. And so the reason you have 35,000 people, 35,000 in the middle of March in the off year, politics works in a 48-month cycle. And right now we're in the most shallow part, especially after we lost the election. 35,000 in Colorado for Bernie and AOC is because the hunger in the base of the party to fight. So it's not, that energy isn't really being met right now by our elected class, hence the outrage over Schumer's actions, not only on the substance, but also on the fact that he's not really meeting the moment right now. And I think the second thing I'll say quickly is that I hinted at it before, but the message on Trump needs to be, so when I do my media hits, it's not actually that useful to talk about defending a government agency per se. A government agency is just means to an end of the outcome to help somebody's life. So we should be talking about how people's lives are being hurt by these destructive, careless actions. And the example I'll give you of that is, if you say that Donald Trump pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists or rioters, whatever you want to call them, you say, okay, well, Biden did some pardons, Trump did his. But if you said Daniel Joseph Rodriguez took a stun gun, Shri, he took it to the carotid artery of a cop. He then had a heart attack. He was, he of course almost died. And then that guy sent a text saying, I tased the blue. That guy was sentenced to 12 years in prison. He's walking the streets now. Does anybody think that guy should be walking the street? So the Democrats and the people opposed to Trump have done a very poor job of illustrating and personalizing and contextualizing and telling people why the hell these actions are going to hurt our country. Obviously, the recession that he's going to tariff us into, the price of eggs and so on, I think will ultimately do the undoing. But I do think the Democratic Party and the progressive movement, after spending $1 billion on a failed campaign telling us that he's a fascist, clearly did no preparation for said fascism that they claimed that they predicted would happen. So that's why there is such a loss of faith in the elected class. That is a legitimate loss of faith, in my view.
Well, thank you, Raj. That was a great way to pause here on this show. We are so grateful to you for being with us. I want Neil to come back as well. We'll read some of these comments. On the Foreman death, Mary says,
yes, that's a great
many
point.
obits passed over how controversial it was, especially among Black folk, how he waved the flag when he won in the Olympics, in stark contrast to the raised fists of Smith and Carlos. It was used by many whites to dismiss and criticize the protests. Everything is political then and now. Well
No
said,
question.
Mary is a great political commentator who has been a guest on the show. We have people watching from around the world. This has been such a information-packed show that we haven't had a chance to read through the entire paper, but this just shows us the moment we're in. And Neil, I'd love you for your thoughts as well. There's just so much we were able to cover, and Raj was so good.
Yeah, it was an incredible show, Raj. More than I was expecting, to be honest with you. I mean, we usually try and focus on our topic, but this really hit a nerve for folks. I mean, it's very, very close to home. Obviously, something Sri has talked about and thought about a lot. It's a personal for me as well with my 11-year-old, as I mentioned earlier. That's why I apologize. I kept jumping in because there were so many places where this was so relevant, but it's so important. I actually want to share breaking news during the middle of the show. We booked Pallavi Guha to join us next week to continue the conversation around social media. So Dr. Pallavi Guha will be our guest next Sunday on Sri's.
Well, I don't have the honor of knowing Pallavi, but I would love if you'd connect me to her. I'd love to fold her in and get to know her. But let me just say, as we close out, I just want to thank the two of you. You know, I know you have a consultancy, but I know a lot. This is probably a labor of love for the two of you to do this show, and it's thoughtful. You have built a real community. I'm honored. I'm not just kidding. I'm honored to be on the show. You know, it is a sign of arriving in New York City in the cognoscenti and the intelligentsia. So, you know, it really is. And I will have to say this also, which is I appreciate the production values. You know, you're not just throwing this on your phone and screwing around. We do the prep. You make sure it looks good. You take time to do the slides and everything to educate your audience. So a lot of people don't do that. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raj.
And everyone, check
out
phonefreeny.org. Get involved. Check out the Five Borough Institute as well. Raj, we're very grateful to know you.
Hey, thanks.
All the things you do in the community for all of us. We really appreciate it.
I do want to share before we leave. Your comments about the Times are well taken, Raj. I think that there's a lot of criticism about the Times. We had someone watching who wanted better coverage of Canada. People always want better coverage internationally as well. But I think that there's a parallel. I mean, there are all the criticisms of, I'm going to say this pre-Donald Trump, the criticisms of the U.S. in terms of the democracy and how well it works, it doesn't work. It's still the best democratic political system in the world. I still think for all its criticisms, the New York Times is the best journalistic newspaper we have, a news outfit. My personal connection, Sri shares the story a lot. You know, I grew up getting the New York Times on our driveway every day, that little blue bag. And it's such a personal thing for me. My dad actually, one of his requests when he was cremated was to have a Sunday paper in the coffin with him when he was cremated. So it is certainly a labor of love. It started off that way. I've been working with Sri for 7 years, well before I joined Digimentors. And I think there's a lot that we can learn, not just from you know, the guests that we have on the show that are not Times related, but when we bring in Times reporters, we actually go under the hood. We look at the process, the background, you know, how the paper gets put together. It's a focus on journalism, and we look at more than just the New York Times when we can, other papers as well. But your criticism is definitely warranted. In a number of ways, the Times has failed, you know, when it comes to major issues of the day. So we need to acknowledge that as well.
Well, if I could say very quickly, Shri, which is, first of all, sorry on the loss of your father. I know the three of us have all lost parents. It's a hellish, painful thing.
15 years. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. And, that's worth another show around caretaking, particularly in the Indian American community and grief and so on. That's not talked about enough. I think the only point I would say, and I wouldn't even call it a criticism, it's just, I think the question for all of us is what's happening. You can't let nostalgia guide.
Sure.
Both of you have told nostalgic stories about the times. And I very much, I was reading the Sunday Times is like the thing. We can all relate to that. But life moves on. And it's not to say that we move on from the times, but there is an explosive, Shri, you're a pioneer in the world of journalism. You may not know this, that my first real job was with a great newspaper, the Wichita Eagle, which was a very respected Midwestern paper. It's better than the Kansas City Star, even though it was a bigger city, won a lot of regional awards, 100 journalists. I mean, it was a wonderful.
And that's what's been lost in America. One of the many ways media.
But the point is that is dead. I mean, so that newsroom is never coming back. That newsroom in Wichita is down to 5 journalists and they print 6 days a week. I'm shocked they even still print. And so we have to think not only just in ways that are that revere the past, but we have to be honest about the moment we're in and how people get their news and how we're going to be responsive, because there were a lot of downsides to this notion of one paper of record. There's a lot of downsides to 3 networks.
100%.
And so, I don't need to tell Sri Srinivasan, obviously, the benefits of the digital world we're in. And I think the question for us moving forward as we try to keep civil society going is how we curate the news, how we relate to people, what we consider to be fact, and how we have that discussion. And so, I always talk about the Republicans and Trump not having a trifecta right now. They have a quinfecta, to coin a word, because they have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency, they have the Supreme Court, and they have social media. And so, so these 5 forces,
and Fox News also, don't forget, they have that.
I should have just said a media ecosystem. They have the Murdoch ecosystem, and then now we have Musk. And so, and those 2 really are incredibly powerful. So these are the questions. The reason I sort of put it to you is I love it, but we don't want to revel in nostalgic yesterday, which is there's so many debates to be having in this existential moment we're in. I just want to make sure that we're in the relevant fight.
I totally agree. Gaurav says, thank you, everyone. Raj's points about the school ban on phones resonated with me. I have 7-year-old twins. Go twin parents. Jonathan says, been attending the show whenever I can since it began, and it's not Deadwood. It's quite lively.
Yeah, of course.
Says, thank you for the entire production team and special guest Raj. And this is a great compliment from Diana, who says A+++++.
Hey, I'll take that.
Thanks, Raj. I learned so much. Worth the early morning wake up. Thank you,
Diana.
Yeah. And so that's crazy. And Sudha says, very good presentation.
Auntie, thank you very much. And your son did a wonderful job.
Great show. Wonderful guest in true journalism. And Naomi says, would love to see more shows like this on journalism's decline. And Jayanti says the Tesla project will not work in India. So that's a whole other conversation. And Dr. Tachi from Fort Lauderdale, that'll be the last word. Thank you. And thank you, Raj. Everybody have a great Sunday. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. And please tell your friends they can watch us live or later on all these channels. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.